With a devastating boom, a truck violently flipped, sending Rick Grimes and Shane Walsh scrambling for cover. Shane, wide-eyed and shaken by the sudden chaos, could only manage a stunned whisper, "This is not good," as Rick, pistol ready, stared intently at the unfolding scene. Eyes narrowed, Shane Walsh, clearly frustrated, griped to Rick Grimes about runoff from the Grant County prison, a sentiment Rick dryly confirmed as a safe bet. Still holding their weapons at the ready, Shane concluded that the person they were dealing with wasn't from around their town. His face a mask of desperate defiance, one of the frantic criminals roared, "I ain't going back. I'll die first." He clutched his gun, a spent casing still flying, his eyes wide with a manic refusal to surrender. Determined to flank their assailant, Rick Grimes burst from cover, drawing intense gunfire as bullets ping at around him. Watching in horror from behind their riddled patrol car, Shane Walsh desperately screamed "Rick" as his friend exposed himself to danger. As Rick Grimes fired back with grim determination, a bullet struck Shane Walsh's weapon with a sharp ping, sending it flying from his stunned grasp, while the criminal's distant boom of gunfire raged on. Shane flinched back, his hands splayed open in shock, now disarmed and vulnerable in the escalating firefight. Rick Grimes slowly stirred awake in a stark hospital room, his consciousness disoriented as he fumbled with the oxygen tube near his mouth. A profound confusion clouded his gaze as he tried to make sense of his unexpected awakening. With a growing, unsettling awareness, Rick Grimes finally managed to pull himself upright on the hospital bed, his body still heavy and disoriented. The Ford drip remained attached, a stark reminder of his long unconsciousness as his vacant gaze tried to make sense of his stark surroundings. Still disoriented, Rick Grimes shakily pulled himself to his feet, gripping the fore-pole for vital support. His eyes, wide with a dawning confusion, gazed out into the unsettling silence of the abandoned hospital room. Rick Grimes's legs buckled beneath him, sending him stumbling backward with a raw gasp of terror as the horrifying truth of his surroundings began to sink in. His wide, disbelieving eyes scanned the empty room, amplifying the crushing weight of his newfound reality. A look of pure panic seized Rick Grimes's face, his eyes wide with desperate confusion as he stumbled and cried out, "Nurse." He desperately searched for any sign of help in the terrifying silence, bewildered by the chaos engulfing him. Desperate, Rick Grimes stretched out his arm, fumbling to press the call button. His gaze searched frantically upwards, hoping for any sign of a nurse to answer his silent plea for help. Rick Grimes, utterly drained, slumped against the cabinet beside his bed, his frantic attempt to summon help seemingly fruitless. His weary gaze fell, a heavy weariness settling over him as the silence of the abandoned room deepened his profound confusion. Utterly spent, Rick Grimes slumped to the cold floor, his gaze lost as the overwhelming silence of the room offered no comfort. He was alone, and the crushing weight of his isolation began to settle in. A wave of weariness washed over Rick Grimes as he gazed into the open drawer, his eyes settling on the familiar uniform and badge. The remnants of his former life, once symbols of order, now lay silent, a stark reminder of everything he had lost. Rick Grimes, his face etched with confusion and a lingering terror, hesitantly stepped out of the silent room. His voice, barely a whisper, echoed with a desperate hope as he called out, "Hello." Rick Grimes, his voice raw with a desperate uncertainty, cautiously stepped into the desolate hallway, calling out, "Hello." He strained to hear a response, his plea echoing as he added, "Anybody?" Rick Grimes, his brow furrowed in disbelief, stared at the empty nurse's station, exclaiming, "What the hell?" A deeper sense of unease settled over him as he questioned, "Did everyone just decide to take a break at the same time?" Rick Grimes, with a palpable sense of dread, emerged into the broader corridor, his eyes fixated on a lone, overturned wheelchair and scattered debris. The chilling silence spoke volumes of the chaos that had erupted, deepening his profound sense of abandonment. Rick Grimes reached out for the elevator call button, his hand hovering, a desperate hope flickering that it might still work in this unsettling silence. Each moment reinforced the chilling reality that he was truly alone. Rick Grimes cautiously peered from the elevator's partially open doors, his gaze filled with weary apprehension as he scanned the deserted corridor. Every shadow held a potential threat, and the oppressive silence only intensified his growing dread. A sudden, anxious ding sliced through the silence, announcing the elevator's arrival. Rick Grimes, his hand instinctively near his weapon, tensed, his gaze locked on the doors, knowing they would soon open to an unknown future. As the elevator doors swung open, a mangled walker abruptly tumbled out with a sickening thwomp, sending Rick Grimes recoiling in shock and letting out a terrified HH. He instinctively pushed back, his hand braced against the wall, his eyes wide with revulsion at the grotesque sight. The mangled walker lay before him, an abhorrent sight that ripped a horrified gasp from Rick Grimes. His eyes wide with disbelief and terror, Rick could only choke out a desperate, raw help as the nightmare unfolded. Rick Grimes stared in utter disbelief at the mangled corpse, his outstretched hand trembling as he cried out, "Somebody help." His terrified gaze pleaded for any assistance, completely overwhelmed by the horrific reality before him. Rick Grimes, his face a mask of terror and confusion, stumbled back from the horrific scene, desperately calling out anybody. His wide, pleading eyes searched the desolate hall for any sign of life, his hands instinctively clutching at himself in a world now utterly alien and terrifying. Still reeling from the horrifying discovery, Rick Grimes slowly moved forward, his wide, fearful eyes scanning the desolate hall for any sign of life or sanity. Each cautious step was a desperate act of courage, pushing him deeper into the chilling unknown. Rick Grimes, still reeling from the horrors he'd encountered, stared at the padlocked cafeteria doors, a faint, unsettling shadow visible behind them. "What the hell?" he uttered, his voice heavy with disbelief and a growing sense of dread. Rick Grimes, his mind still reeling, pressed his hand against the barricaded door, his gaze desperately searching the dim interior for any clue. Overwhelmed by the silence and the ominous barricade, a quiet question escaped him. What happened here? Rick Grimes gripped the door handle with raw determination, his gaze fixed on what lay beyond. Every ounce of his shattered being yearned for a path, an escape from the nightmare he found himself trapped within. Rick Grimes stared in utter horror as a grotesque walker closed in, his desperate URH, turning into a frantic, "Can't you understand?" as he tried to push them back. Panicked, he yelled, "Stop! Get away from me!" while struggling against the overwhelming horde that now poured through the doorway. Rick Grimes stumbled back, hitting the ground with a desperate thump as a horrifying chorus of URH filled the air. His gaze, wide with despair, locked onto the grotesque horde of walkers surging through the opening, utterly overwhelming him. Cornered and horrified, Rick Grimes desperately cried out, "Stop! Get away from me," as the monstrous walker loomed over him, its proximity intensifying his desperate plea. With a desperate "please," Rick Grimes stumbled and fell, the thwomp of his impact echoing as the relentless walkers dragged him down. His cries were swallowed by their hungry snarls, his body pulled deeper into the horde's terrifying grasp. Rick Grimes, utterly helpless, crashed to the ground with a sickening whump as the ravenous walkers swarmed over him. Above, Shane and a terrified Carl could only watch, paralyzed by the horrifying spectacle unfolding before them. As Rick Grimes lay helpless on the unforgiving ground, a sickening snap pierced the air, forcing his gaze upon the gruesome sight of a skull violently torn open, its contents spilling out. The sheer brutality of the scene cemented the terrifying new reality he now inhabited. Startled and horrified, Rick Grimes exclaimed, "What the hell was that?" from behind the bars of his hospital room, grappling with the vivid memory of crashing onto a walker and its chilling chomp. Still reeling, he uttered a dazed "OPS" before desperately gripping something for balance, then cautiously stepped into the desolate parking garage. There, he thoughtfully murmured, as he tried a car door, determined to find a way to escape this nightmare. Rick Grimes, now free from his confinement, hesitantly stepped into the vast, desolate space, his eyes wide as he surveyed the abandoned vehicles and scattered debris. The crushing silence, broken only by the echo of his own heavy breathing, underscored the chilling truth of his new, bewildering reality. Rick Grimes stepped into the vast, silent hall, his gaze sweeping over the overturned furniture and scattered debris that littered the empty space. The eerie silence and sheer desolation solidified his growing dread, hinting at the terrifying truth that awaited him. Rick Grimes finally stepped out into the open air, a chill wind greeting him as he took in the overgrown path leading away from the familiar, yet eerily silent Harrison Memorial Hospital. His brow furrowed with a profound sense of unease, Rick stood bewildered amidst the unsettling quiet, trying to process the desolate landscape that had replaced the world he knew. Rick Grimes, emerging from the desolate hospital, pointed towards a makeshift sign, its weathered text, "Evacuation Hospital Prep/Tent," confirming his worst fears. The chaotic scene, engulfed in smoke and debris, only deepened his desperate confusion as he tried to comprehend the world around him. Rick, walking further from the hospital, whispered, "Dead," as he spotted a wrecked car, its gruesome interior hinting at the chaos that had transpired. His gaze then fell upon a lone bicycle wheel and a bus stop sign, and with wide, terrified eyes, Rick could only utter, "Jesus," the horror of his new reality fully dawning on him. Rick Grimes, finding a bicycle amidst the desolation, began pushing it along a lonely path, his focus unwavering. With a quiet, determined gaze, he pressed onward, fueled by the desperate hope of finding Lori and Carl. Rick Grimes, overwhelmed by the desolate reality surrounding him, drops to his knees in despair. His horrified gaze sweeps across the ravaged landscape as a choked whisper escapes his lips, "Oh God." Utterly broken by the overwhelming desolation, Rick Grimes lay slumped on the cold ground beside his bicycle, his desperate search for Lori and Carl momentarily collapsing under the weight of an abandoned world. His body language screamed despair, utterly defeated in this lonely landscape. Overwhelmed, Rick Grimes could only stare out at the bleak, empty world that stretched endlessly before him. The desolate road and barren trees mirrored the profound emptiness in his heart, leaving him utterly alone in his despair. Rick Grimes, his weariness deepening, stumbled upon a grisly scene along the deserted road. A mangled, lifeless body lay discarded, offering a silent, horrifying testament to the world's brutal transformation. With grim determination, Rick Grimes knelt by the roadside, his hands sifting through whatever remained near the mangled vehicle. Each small find was a testament to his desperate struggle for survival in this desolate new world. The horrifying sight and putrid stench forced Rick Grimes to recoil, his face contorting in a raw expression of nausea. He struggled to hold back a wave of disgust, instinctively raising a hand to cover his mouth. Rick Grimes, his jaw set with grim determination, propelled himself forward on the scavenged bicycle, the horrifying roadside scene still burning in his memory. He pedaled with renewed urgency, driven by the desperate need to find Lori and Carl and escape the horrors he'd witnessed. With unwavering determination, Rick Grimes continued to pedal the scavenged bicycle, the empty road stretching out before him. Every turn of the wheel was a desperate journey towards the hope of finding Lori and Carl amidst the quiet apocalypse. Rick Grimes stepped cautiously into what he hoped was his home, only for his heart to sink at the sight of the ransacked room within. His gaze swept over the overturned furniture and debris, a chilling premonition that Lori and Carl were nowhere to be found. Rick Grimes stared intently at the framed family photo, his weary gaze lingering on the familiar faces of Lori and Carl. The image of his smiling family deepened the ache in his chest, fueling his desperate hope to find them alive. Rick Grimes cautiously peered into the bedroom, his gaze desperately searching for any sign of Lori or Carl amidst the disarray. The scattered belongings only heightened his growing dread, confirming the abrupt chaos that had swept through his family's life. Rick Grimes entered what was once a familiar room, his shoulders slumping as he took in the scene of complete disarray. The overturned furniture and scattered belongings offered no comfort, only a stark absence of Lori and Carl, deepening his dread. Lori Grimes leaned over the porch railing, her gaze fixed on something unseen below with a focused, almost anxious intensity. A quiet watchfulness settled upon her features, reflecting the harsh new reality she now faced daily. Lori Grimes leaned heavily on the railing, her slumped posture betraying a profound weariness as she grimly muttered, "Moving." Despite her exhaustion, her attention remained fixed on the relentless, advancing threat. Shane Walsh stood amidst the overgrown yard, his beard prominent and his gaze steady, seemingly surveying the area or perhaps observing something just out of frame. His casual, yet watchful posture suggested a quiet vigilance in the desolate landscape. Rick Grimes, disheveled and worn, stared with wide, bewildered eyes, his mouth agape. His desperate, questioning gaze took in the scene before him, a profound shock washing over his weary face. Shane Walsh's hand gripped the worn handle of a shovel, a tool for both survival and defense in this ravaged new world. His firm, almost white-knuckled hold subtly conveyed the hardened resolve he now carried, even as the impossible sight of Rick surely resonated. Rick Grimes slowly blinked his eyes open, a soft "huh" escaping his lips as his disoriented mind struggled to grasp his blurry surroundings. His messy hair and unfocused gaze betrayed a deep confusion, a lingering haze from his long sleep. As Rick Grimes's disoriented mind struggled to focus, a polite man appeared, inviting him with a gentle "Oh, Padre. Annie and I are just getting ready to have dinner. Would you care to join us?" The jarring normalcy of the invitation, so utterly out of place, made Rick's head spin with a confused and desperate "Wait, what the hell is going on here?" Rick Grimes, still reeling from his injury, looked confusedly at the polite man who apologized. "Sorry about my boy. He hit you over the head with a shovel." The man then explained that his young son, sitting nearby, thought you were one of those things, leaving Rick to grapple with the implied danger. Rick Grimes's eyes widened in sheer horror, finally connecting the dots of his nightmarish awakening as he recoiled, shouting, "You mean those monsters that are at the hospital? Who are you people? What the hell is going on?" His frantic gaze and outstretched hand betrayed his utter terror and confusion at the unimaginable reality unfolding around him. Alarmed by Rick's sudden horror, the man quickly raised a hand in a placating gesture, trying to defuse the situation. He nervously insisted, Whoa, calm down here, buddy. This was all just a misunderstanding. My joke didn't mean anything," clearly rattled by Rick's intense reaction. Rick Grimes, his brow furrowed in desperate confusion, pleaded for understanding. How did it all happen? "What you mean?" His wide, bewildered eyes searched for answers to the horror that had consumed the world while he slept. Eyes wide with profound shock, the man stared at Rick Grimes, expressing disbelief that he knew nothing of the world's catastrophe. Realizing the gravity of Rick's ignorance, his face contorted in concern as he urgently interjected, "Wait a minute. Hold up." As the man in the rocking chair soberly detailed the world's collapse, explaining how media had ceased and those things are everywhere, a distraught Rick Grimes recounted his own terrifying ordeal, desperate to know what caused it, his wife Lori and son Carl missing. The man then grimly confirmed that a good blow to the head will take them out, the harsh reality of their new world. As he detailed the final, chilling broadcasts, the man explained to Rick that the authorities had admitted they couldn't protect us all, urging evacuation to bigger cities. With a look of weary resignation, he confessed his choice to stay, believing he was better off taking my chances here. Morgan looked up, offering a strained, perhaps hollow, reassurance to Rick. "Oh yeah, I'm sure they're fine." He tried to convince himself as much as Rick that loved ones could endure such a nightmare. With a determined finger, Rick insisted that the cities were where Lori must have gone, adding, "Thank God. If they're protecting the cities, hell, I was so worried." His expression was a raw mix of hope and the lingering terror of his recent awakening. Rick, with a faint, weary smile, held up a set of keys and directed a grim jest at Morgan, asking, "Wanna go shopping?" His gaze, however, remained resolute as he declared, "Well, I need a car if I'm going to get to Atlanta to find Lori and Carl." Morgan, his gaze shifting to Rick with a dawning realization, asked, "So you're a cop, huh?" Rick, standing tall at the Cynthia Police Department entrance, simply replied, "Yep." Morgan, who had figured Rick for a hunter after hearing his story, then hesitantly inquired, "You mind my boy and I crash at your memory place, do you?" Looking at Morgan with an understanding, yet weary expression, Rick clarified he wasn't there to arrest him, noting that he seemed to be minding the looted Thompson's house. He offered a slight, reassuring nod, adding, "As long as you don't put up a fight over the place." Morgan, still wary and with arms spread in a defensive posture, tried to explain their intrusion, "Not like we're stealing, your neighborhood just seemed safer." Understanding his desperation as a father, Rick empathetically reassured him, "You don't have to justify anything to me. I'm worried sick about mine. I understand." As Rick Grimes formally introduced himself as Officer Rick Grimes at your service, Morgan looked back with a tired politeness. He acknowledged the gesture, admitting, "I appreciate that. You know, I don't think I got your name," a subtle hint at the mental strain of their tense encounter. Relief washed over Morgan as he finally introduced himself and his son, "Oh, Morgan Jones. And this here's little Dwayne," shaking Rick's hand with a tentative smile while Dwayne peeked shyly from behind. Rick, still projecting warmth, returned the handshake and asked, "And you?" continuing to bridge the distance between them. Rick, meeting Morgan's gaze with deep appreciation, thanked him profusely. "You're a good man, Morgan. I really appreciate you having me over much. You've helped me out a lot." Morgan then looked away, revealing his quiet isolation as he admitted, "It's rough to get to talk to someone. My son don't want to talk about it." Rick looked up with a hopeful, almost wistful smile, whispering Lori, as the thought of his wife filled his mind. The longing in his gaze spoke of his desperate need to find her and their son, Carl, in this terrifying new world. Rick's hopeful smile for Lori quickly faded, his eyes closing as the overwhelming burden of his journey and the uncertainty of finding his family settled upon him. A profound weariness etched itself onto Rick's face, the enormity of his quest momentarily eclipsing his fragile hope. Rick Grimes, his face etched with weariness, looked down as he confessed, "After everything I've seen today, I feel guilty for laughing." A weary damn then escaped his lips, reflecting the immense burden of his horrifying discoveries. Shane, placing a comforting hand on Rick's shoulder and holding a beer, advised his weary friend, "You guys gotta shake some. You can't stop to think about it or you'll go crazy." Rick, his gaze still troubled, quietly looked down and questioned, "What's left after that?" With a weary gaze fixed downwards, Rick gripped his revolver, explaining his grim preparedness. "I figured I might as well bring a gun along, just in case some of them follow me." Shane looked up, a subtle apprehension in his eyes, as he quietly responded, "Oh yeah." Shane declared their arrival, "Here we are," as Rick, his weary gaze fixed on the lock, began meticulously searching for the proper key, stating with a hint of frustrated determination, "I just need to find the right key to get them inside." Shane, leaning casually against the doorframe, urged Rick to grab a couple for yourself, confidently stating that if crude methods worked, "I'm sure those things will work." As Rick surveyed the impressive arsenal with a quiet intensity, young Carl, wide-eyed in the midst of it all, could only whisper a soft, awestruck "wow." Shane, looking intently at Rick, clearly instructed him to find the shells in the cabinet below the gun rack. He pointedly reminded Rick to grab some for him, before stating he would be right back, leaving Rick to the urgent task. Carl, perhaps eager to assist, reached for the shells in the cabinet below, only for Shane to sharply command, "No, damn it. Don't touch anything." Startled, Carl began to stammer, as Rick, already bent down, looked up, undoubtedly surprised by Shane's sudden outburst. Holding two rifles firmly, Shane looked down at Carl and declared, "Yeah, you are. And I'm gonna teach you how to use one of them tomorrow, but until then they're off limits." Carl, with an eager but slightly defiant gaze, insisted, "But I'm old enough." Rick Grimes observed Shane with a slight, wry look, remarking, "Well, that shit certainly suits you." Then, his gaze turning to a more practical concern, he added, "Are there enough shells for both of us in there?" Shane, a wide, confident grin spreading across his face, beckoned Rick to follow him. "Grab what you're getting and follow me out back. I got a little surprise for you." His eyes gleamed with an almost mischievous anticipation as he held his rifle and a box of supplies. Shane confidently explained his reasoning to Rick for his dramatic new look, stating, "I figured if I was going into a big city and there's got a ton of people holed there, I could get me a cowboy done. Might as well look the part." Rick listened intently, processing his friend's theatrical confidence and the grim reality that necessitated such a transformation. Rick, visibly taken aback by Shane's rapid decisions, could only stammer, what, as his friend confidently declared his intent to claim the newer police cruiser for their journey to Atlanta. Shane then briskly instructed Rick to take the remaining vehicle, asserting his leadership without question. Shane began to object, but his words cut short by Rick. Now heavily clad in a hat and jacket, Rick looked at his friend with a serious, almost strained gaze, insisting, "You'll be safer in one of these things if you need to go anywhere," determined to equip Shane for the dangers of their new world. Shane, heavily clad and resolute, faced Rick directly, firmly stating, "Don't sweat it, man. I'm just doing my job. I can't think of a better way to protect and serve under the circumstances." Rick listened, his back to Shane, as the heavy words settled between them. Shane, obscured by his hat within the vehicle, offered Rick a strained, casual warning, "When things get back to normal, you'll have to give it back. So try not to bang it up or put too many miles on it." His words, laced with a false optimism, hinted at the profound uncertainty of their ravaged world. With an expression of profound relief and gratitude, T-Dog looked toward Rick and Shane, his eyes wide as he earnestly declared, "Thanks, you guys. I can't tell you how much this will help us." His words conveyed the immense weight of their struggle and the desperate hope newfound resources offered. Shane, still obscured by his hat within the vehicle, continued his strained warning to Rick and T-Dog. "Look, you've already waited." A definitive clink underscored his urgency, clearly pushing them to leave the unsettling scene behind. Rick Grimes's face was etched with profound shock, his eyes wide with disbelief as he urgently demanded, "What happened?" He desperately sought an explanation for the sudden chaos, his mind reeling from the immediate terror they had just endured. T-Dog's hand landed firmly on Rick Grimes's shoulder, his gaze direct as he cautioned, "Leave it be if I can't get to OEM here. You'll need that bullet later." Rick, still clutching his weapon, looked up, his face a mix of exhaustion and the grim realization that every shot counted in this unforgiving world. Shane Walsh, his expression a blend of grim resolve and urgency, asserted, "We better get these cars out of here before it makes its way around to the guys." He then nodded, acknowledging the dire necessity of their task with a curt, "Yeah, you're right." Shane Walsh, behind the wheel, offered a seemingly casual farewell, asking Rick Grimes, "I'll see you around." Still optimistic and unaware, Rick simply replied, "We do." Shane then offered a hollow reassurance, OH. "Of course. We're neighbors. I'll keep an eye on your house for me before pulling away." Shane Walsh's police car pulled away, its side bearing the word police, as it moved past a fence, leaving Rick Grimes behind with the quiet aftermath of their abrupt parting. Shane Walsh's patrol car moved steadily onward, the word police emblazoned on its side as it passed a metal fence. With each turn of the wheels, a seemingly ordinary day continued, unaware of the grim future that awaited both Shane and Rick Grimes. As Shane's patrol car disappeared into the distance, Rick remained rooted by the fence, his head hanging low. The overwhelming reality of his lone journey to find Lori and Carl settled heavily upon him. After Shane's car disappeared into the distance, Rick remained alone by the fence, his head bowed in a mixture of despair and resolve. A single name echoed in his mind, Lori, a silent vow to find his lost wife. As Shane's patrol car disappeared into the distance, the desolate road stretched before Rick, bathed in an unforgiving moonlight. The emptiness of the landscape mirrored the gnawing uncertainty left in Rick as he watched his friend vanish. A stark "Welcome to Georgia" sign greeted Rick, a grim milestone on his desperate journey to find Lori and Carl amidst the ravaged landscape. Though the world was broken, he clung to the hope that his family lay somewhere ahead in this desolate state. With his police cruiser out of fuel once more, Rick's frustration reached its peak. He furiously kicked the broken gas pump, yelling, "God damn it. Not again." Each futile stop was another agonizing delay in his desperate search for Lori and Carl, a painful reminder of the world's decay. From his stalled cruiser, Rick watched a horrifying scene unfold as a terrified survivor in a wrecked vehicle screamed, "AH," their gaze fixed on the grotesque walker lunging through the broken window. The desperate struggle was a brutal, stark reminder of the world he now inhabited. Despite the desolate highway littered with countless abandoned vehicles, Rick Grimes continued his relentless drive, his gaze fixed forward. He pressed on, a grim determination set on his face, pushing past the constant reminders of the world's collapse in his desperate search for his family. Facing yet another obstacle, Rick Grimes leaned against his stalled cruiser, his gaze sweeping the desolate landscape with weary determination. The silence was deafening, but his resolve to find Lori and Carl pushed him onward, despite the grim reality of the abandoned world. Slumping heavily against the cruiser's interior, Rick Grimes felt the full weight of exhaustion and defeat wash over him as his vehicle finally stalled. With a sigh, he let his head fall, the grim reality of his isolated situation pressing in. With a heavy heart, Rick Grimes knew his cruiser was truly dead, so he shouldered his bag and, with unwavering resolve, continued his arduous journey on foot towards an uncertain future. Having shouldered his bag, Rick Grimes cast a final, mournful glance at the dead cruiser before turning his back on it. His solitary figure began the long, desolate walk, the heavy silence of the apocalypse amplifying his desperate resolve to find Lori and Carl. Rick Grimes pressed onward down the desolate road, his gaze hardened and his face set with a grim determination to find his family. Leaving the last vestiges of his old life behind, every step was a testament to his unyielding resolve. Rick Grimes, still set on his path, sharply turned his head, his gaze suddenly fixed on something unsettling in the distance. A choked whisper escaped his lips as he barely managed to utter, "WL." With his gaze fixed on a new path, Rick Grimes didn't hesitate, scrambling over the weathered wooden fence. His determination was clear as he moved away from the main road, pressing onward towards his unseen goal. Rick Grimes finally stood before the quiet, weathered house, his gaze fixed on its forlorn facade. A knot of hope and dread tightened in his chest, knowing this could be the place he'd find some trace of Lori and Carl, or simply another empty echo. Rick Grimes raised his hand, knocking firmly on the weathered door with a hopeful yet anxious thwack. Thwack. His gaze remained fixed, a silent plea for any sign of life, any whisper of his family within. With a look of sheer terror twisting his features, Rick Grimes desperately cried out, "Anyone home?" His frantic plea, laced with a raw mix of hope and despair, hung heavy in the silence, receiving no reply. With no response to his frantic calls, Rick Grimes gripped the doorknob tightly, his desperate hope warring with a building fear. "I'm coming in," he declared, twisting the handle with resolute determination to find his family inside. Rick Grimes cautiously pushed the door open, his body half hidden as he scanned the room with desperate eyes. "I'm not here to hurt or rob you," he called out, his voice edged with both fear and an urgent plea. "I just need some drying." Rick Grimes's eyes widened in horror, his body tensing as a guttural G sound erupted from the dark space before him. Simultaneously, a voice from nearby gasped, "That's Daryl," giving a name to Rick's sudden alarm. Rick Grimes recoiled with a visceral GH, his face contorting in pure disgust. He squeezed his eyes shut, unable to bear the gruesome sight that had sprung from the darkness. Rick Grimes, hat askew and gun still raised, stood frozen in the doorway as his gaze fell upon the horrific carnage. His mouth agape and eyes wide, a raw gasp escaped him at the sight of the mangled, bloody bodies strewn across the floor. Rick Grimes violently recoiled, his face a horrifying mask of pure dread as he instinctively threw out a hand to push away the grotesque scene before him. The unimaginable horror threatened to overwhelm his senses completely. Rick Grimes threw out his arm in a desperate reflex, a guttural HWGG, tearing from his throat as he stumbled back. The raw terror of the scene utterly consumed him. Rick Grimes, his initial dread settling into a cautious resolve, approached the barn with wary eyes. Peering into the dim interior, he found only a lone horse and, in a soft voice, tentatively offered, "Hello." Rick Grimes, finding a lonely horse within the barn, extended a gentle hand to pet its muzzle. "Hey boy, they leave you in here all alone," he murmured softly, a fleeting moment of solace in his voice as he connected with another survivor of the silent apocalypse. Rick Grimes, addressing the quiet horse, articulated his desperate mission. "I sure could use your help. If you're interested, I'm trying to get to Atlanta to see my wife and son." His plea, tinged with a father's profound longing for Lori and Carl, highlighted the solitary hope driving him onward. Rick Grimes, preparing for the perilous journey with his weapon, addressed the horse, saying, "You may as well come, I think. I might oughta have a handy." He then leaned in, asking softly, "You ever been to Atlanta? It's not really that far away." With a determined grip, Rick then cried, "Let's go," urging the animal into a powerful gallop as his desperate quest began. Son devam edier. With a determined "let's go," Rick Grimes set off, his gaze fixed on the uncertain path ahead, every step bringing him closer or further from his family. He pushed forward, driven by the desperate hope of finding Lori and Carl amidst the desolate, dangerous landscape. Rick Grimes, astride his galloping horse, urged it on with a mix of determination and concern. "Now don't believe I know you've been in that barn for a while, but you're going to wear yourself out," he exclaimed, his gaze fixed forward as they pressed onward. Rick Grimes, with a determined gaze, urged his horse onward, clearing a sturdy wall in a powerful leap. His relentless pursuit of Lori and Carl propelled him forward, fueled by a desperate hope. Suddenly, Rick Grimes' horse reared violently, its front hooves flailing in the air as he cried out, "W Choi." Rick clung on, his eyes wide with surprise at the unexpected stop. Having brought his horse back under control, Rick Grimes continued his journey, his voice firm as he encouraged the animal. "That's better," he said, determined to conserve its energy. "I don't want you using any effort till we get there." Rick Grimes continued his journey down the desolate highway, the road ahead stretching endlessly with abandoned cars as the only markers of a world that once was. His solitary figure on horseback emphasized the crushing isolation he felt, yet he pressed on, driven by an unyielding hope to find Lori and Carl. As Rick Grimes continued his journey down the desolate tracks, his determined form faced forward as he sought a mental escape. He mused that focusing on the happiest day of my life will surely get my mind off all the messed up SHD I've seen recently, a desperate attempt to find solace from the horrors surrounding him. I had just gotten into work that morning, Rick Grimes mused, his gaze distant as he reflected on the last moments of a world now lost. His expression held a quiet, somber understanding of the irreversible shift in his life. With a pained, nostalgic gaze, Rick Grimes remembered the frantic morning Lori's water broke, just minutes after he'd left for work. He recounted scrambling home, grabbing his gear, and getting Shane to call Doc Stevens so they could meet at the hospital. Rick Grimes reflected on the urgent drive to the hospital with Lori, even admitting the small-town thrill of using his siren. He vividly remembered holding her hand through complications and a C-section, confessing his profound worry before the immense relief that everything ultimately went okay for his family. Lost in the tender haze of memory, Rick Grimes fondly recounted the first time I laid eyes on little Carl. His expression, filled with a father's overwhelming love, yearned for the return of those cherished moments. Rick Grimes lay still, lost in the deep slumber of his coma, as a soft, rhythmic ZZZ marked the unconscious passage of time. His face remained peaceful, utterly unaware of the world unraveling beyond his hospital bed. But then, Rick Grimes' features contorted in a silent, desperate grimace, as if an unheard scream tore at his very being. His eyes squeezed shut, locked in a painful struggle to surface from the suffocating depths of his coma. Rick Grimes walked alone down the desolate road, a small figure amidst the barren landscape, as he reflected, on second thought, thinking about the good times makes all this seem so much worse. The heavy realization of his shattered past made the crushing emptiness of his new reality even more unbearable. Rick Grimes, a lone figure on horseback amidst the urban desolation, could only voice a confused "Where am I?" as he navigated the silent, empty streets of Atlanta. His gaze, initially filled with weary determination, soon shifted to a horrified realization of the countless undead, whispering a desperate "Nenny" as he found himself surrounded by the hungry horde.